this really is the end of the original idea saga. I will do my very best to summarize, maybe highlight some of the points that I find more important than others, and then I will move on. But considering the fact that I've spent about 5 videos on this already, I think that it is clear that it is truly that significant to me and my enjoyment of reading a story, enjoying a different world. And it all comes down to my firm belief that as I read more and more recent stories, recent fiction, that what I truly want is to write, to create something fully original, based solely on my imagination, something that hadn't took any inspiration anywhere else, be it real life or other people's works. Doesn't matter how improbable, maybe even impossible that is. And also, it might truly be something so important to me that it supersedes my idea, my need for a, in my eyes, real protagonist, my need for actual antagonists, both men and women, or anything else storytelling wise. Well, other than what I've mentioned in the previous video, I'm realizing that I'm contradicting myself, maybe at least to a small extent, and not helping with this summary of mine, but oh well. I warned about this, that it might and will happen, at least now I'm aware of it. But I'm almost fully convinced now that after talking about different ways to craft a tale, a different world that is truly completely separate from our real world, for me to enjoy it with no regrets, it needs to be as close to new as my feeble prehistoric mind can even conjure. A story that doesn't take from the usual tropes, that doesn't do the usual character development, that avoids the tested, the working, because at the end of the day, I've already read that before in some shape or form, in some combination of these elements of storytelling, and I guess that it comes with simply consuming way too many stories, some on a superficial level, obviously, I'm not going to deny that, but I am definitely a bit, well, special. So anyway, maybe a sum of ideas that I will consciously make and force to be original will come out as something that I, with my own skewed rules and very limited understanding of storytelling and writing, will be able to call wholly imagined. Not good. Almost definitely not good. But if I do somehow miraculously manage to balance the hunt, the desperate strive for original ideas, for novelty, for the unconventionally odd, with some amount of actual world building, introducing at least some characters, and a semi cohesive story that will hide somewhere in between that, I might be able to reach the standard of passable, and honestly, I'm fine with that. I just want to read something that will not stop me anywhere at any point of that story and force me to force myself to continue. And if I can somehow even approach that, well, then it was worth it. And if there is at least some progress in between the attempts, then that would be even better. But for now, Mr. Fogler's mind conjured a story that I can talk about, and it's time to revisit the land of dreams, Speedy's dreams, as he is being admonished by his father for overly immersing himself in the stories of great Karl May, threatening disposal, including Olda Shatterhand, or whatever his name is. So Speedy, before going to bed, in his mind, reprimands his father, defending his awesome books, curious about his father's reaction if Old Shatterhand did appear in Speedy's real world, and barely managing to close his eyes, Old Shatterhand rides into his bedroom on his trusty horse, rhyming an invitation for Speedy to join him on a quest to rescue Winnetou. Speedy's first reaction being that there is a small issue of him having to go and buy potatoes the first thing in the morning. Well, and the milk is not going to bring itself either, but still decides to join his favorite hero on his quest. And on their way there, they reach crossroads with an old man conveniently walking on the side of the road. So Speedy receives his own task to find the directions. So he asks the old man for the shortest route to the territory of the crafty Comanches, which the man knows from the top of his head, sending him through the village of Oholichki, and once they are past, they just need to continue onward, and in case they get lost, ask the locals, since they'll be almost there at that point. So with a bit of luck, they arrive in front of the hunting grounds of the Comanches, and the official gate into the territory is guarded by Indians, and there are some interesting rules. First thing first, importing scalps is strictly forbidden. Its demand is comfortably covered by the Comanches themselves, and the next sign says passport control. Make sure that you have all your papers ready. The need for passports throws a wrench into their plan to enter through the gate, so they will have to find a different way inside. And while Speedy is climbing back on top of the horse using a ladder, Old Shatterhand asks him if he is not afraid of water, which he replies to with only if it's the fire kind. Then their alternative route is revealed. They are going to jump off a cliff into a river, cross it, and they are inside of the territory. After the jump, Speedy likens it to a Czech legend of Horimir and Shemik, who also jumped into a river, but that river was Vltava, and then they are already inside of the enemy's territory, so Old Shatterhand warns Speedy against any sounds that might catch anyone's attention, which in turn summons Speedy hiccups. But anyway, crawling through the bushes, Old Shatterhand asks Speedy if he is delighted by the fact that he is living through the adventures that up until now he could only read about in books. Speedy being a bit on the fence, with both enjoyment and a little bit of fear. But then they reach the camp where Winnetou is held. The plan is simple: send Speedy to cut the ropes, as since he is an unknown, the consequences for him if he fails would be lesser than what would happen to a known enemy such as Old Shatterhand, and he promises Speedy that afterwards he will certify Speedy's beaver of courage, and so our young hero begins the crawl with a knife in his mouth getting a little bit of cold feet, wishing that he had stayed at home and actually brought those potatoes and milk instead of joining on this rather dangerous expedition. He still manages to reach Winnetou, who's tied to the proverbial stake of death. Speedy cuts his ropes. Winnetou commands his new white brother for his bravery and promises to never forget this grace, then promptly disappears, leaving Speedy to deal with a crowd of Comanches who catch him and promise him that since he released one of their prisoners, he will then replace him at the stake of death. And despite Speedy's attempts to dissuade the situation and downplay the importance of one measly Winnetou being rescued, he is still tied to where the original prisoner had been before the daring act of courage. His screams for help are left unanswered even by his father randomly driving by on a kick scooter, who asks Speedy to play for a little bit longer and then make sure that those potatoes and milk will find their way home. Next, he sees the rest of his club, who are apparently there with the rest of their school on a trip and managed to get ahead of the rest of their classmates, but they offer no help, no reprieve for poor Speedy. Then the rest of the school arrives, led by an old teacher who is reprimanding them for disrupting the marching formation just because someone is tied to a stake of death. They did not receive permission to loiter, so when they also pass by, it's finally time to torture poor Speedy to death and then eat him, which is a line used during their play about the traveler and that one African tribe that they performed so long ago. Speedy tries one last time to persuade the Indians to release him, citing his need to acquire said potatoes and milk as the reason, but they don't seem willing to listen. And then we are back in the real world with Speedy covering in his own bed and his father questioning what kind of help Speedy needs with bringing in groceries. The only help that Speedy will receive from him will be with getting out of bed, and we can all imagine the kind of help Speedy would receive with that. Afterwards, we see Speedy leaving the milkery. Yes, a shop that specializes in selling milk, delighted by the fact that there was no stake of death, that there were no Indians in the cellar where he had gone to get those potatoes from, clearly being cured of his maybe a bit unhealthy obsession with fictional stories, at least for now. And this is where I'm going to stop for today. And more things to say will appear in the next video.